Hello, my name is Laura Doolin. I'm a California State Park interpreter here at the Silver Strand State Beach Park in San Diego. Welcome. Glad to have you here today. We're going to be talking about all the ways in which eelgrass provides very important habitat for the animals in the bay. So just a few things as we get started. As we go along, I might ask you to talk to the person next to you and ask them questions. So be prepared for that. Or you may choose instead to work alone and write in your notebook. And also, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of drawing. So be prepared with a whiteboard or pencil and some paper. So, all right, let's go ahead and get going. So let's first look at where we are. I'm going to show you a map. Okay, so here we see a map of the San Diego Bay, and we have a blue circle around something called the Strand. The Silver Strand State Beach is located here. So it's kind of a narrow strip of land, and on one side, we have the ocean. On the other side, we have the bay. And so I'm recording this from the bay side. Where we're located, we have Coronado, the town to the north, and Imperial Beach is to our south. And so in this narrow sand strip, in the past, it was much more narrow, but they dredged or moved the sand to make it wider so that they could build roads and build buildings. And so that's a little bit about where we are. All right, so next, okay, one second. All right, so next, I'm just going to pan around the bay and just give you a little glance at where I'm at. So this is just a small section of the bay. The bay is quite large. We're on near the south end of the bay down here. Okay. So next, I'd like you to turn to the person next to you and we wanted to start thinking a little bit about who lives in this bay. So ask the person next to you, what animals do you think might be found in this bay? So take a couple minutes, ask, think about it, write it down. Go ahead. All right, so you might have said some things like fish or sharks. Those would all be correct. Crabs, right? Many creatures live in the bay. Good. So I want you to think a little bit more and ask the person next to you, so what do you think the animals in the bay eat? All right, so there's many different answers, but just give a minute to brainstorm. So ask your partner, what do we think different animals in the bay are eating? Okay, so again, there's many different answers to this question. So you may have said, well, the bigger fish are eating the smaller fish. That could be correct. Some things are eating the crabs in the bay or eating, it just depends, different things. But one thing that we're going to focus on today is eelgrass, okay? And certain creatures eat the eelgrass directly. So let's take a look at what eelgrass looks like. All right, this is a picture of eelgrass, and it typically grows in bays between 3 to 9 feet of water. It likes to grow in a shallow bay. It needs the light for that intense growth, and it also, so it is very rich in nutrients. It's a very important part of our bay. So let us look at another picture here. Okay, this is a map of the bay, and wherever you see green, right, that is where the eelgrass is growing in the bay. So we have about 50% of all of Southern California's eelgrass habitat here in the bay. So if you notice, there's a big green patch at the bottom of this map, and that is the San Diego Bay National Wildlife Refuge, and it's a special place where the eelgrass habitat remains intact, right? And many animals, so where we are on the Pacific Flyway, so we have many different birds that are migrating through the area, and they come from as far north as Alaska, heading as far south as Mexico, Central America, South America. So they need places to stop along the way and eat and fuel up and get strong and rest. And that patch of green is a really good place for them to stop and eat and fuel up and get strong for that long flight migration. So very important area. So let's look at another picture here. Okay, this is where I'm going to ask you to do some drawing. Doesn't matter if you're good at drawing or just really drawing in order to observe, okay? So this is a picture of an eelgrass meadow, and we see the long tendrils of grass growing up from the bottom to the top. Now I'm going to give you about 4 minutes, so I'm going to give you time to just draw and observe everything you can in that eelgrass meadow. There are many different creatures because an eelgrass meadow, the eelgrass, like I said, provides a rich habitat for many different animals. So go ahead and draw, take about 4 minutes to draw and observe. Okay, good. Keep going. Give you a couple more minutes. Right. Good job. All right, one more minute. So don't forget to draw everything from what's below the mud, right? The bottom, the middle, and the very top. One more minute. All right, very good. So next, I'd just like you to take a minute or two to show your drawing to the person next to you, and as best you can, just explain what it is that you observed. It's okay if you don't know the exact name of something. So just go ahead and share with your partner, your drawing, or the person next to you. All right. Hopefully both of you had a minute to share. Good job. So you might have drawn, right, the top where the ducks are reaching down and eating the eelgrass, or we have many fish swimming throughout the eelgrass, right? Or we have some creatures like starfish and snails at the bottom on the mud, or clams digging deep into the mud. And like I mentioned, all of these creatures are benefiting in one way or another from having the eelgrass growing there. So we're going to talk now about 3 specific animals in our bay and how they benefit from having this eelgrass growing in the bay. All right. Take a look here. Okay, this is the Eastern Pacific green sea turtle, right? Beautiful. It's one of the people's favorite creatures here in the bay, but actually very few people know that it even exists here because we don't see it very often. Usually it's at the bottom of the bay eating exactly what it has in its mouth right now. So you can say out loud or to the person next to you, what do you think is in its mouth? What do you think it's eating? If you said eelgrass, good job. Yes, right now it is eating, in this picture, it is eating the eelgrass. which is very nutritious. So green sea turtles, when they're young, they might eat different things like jellyfish, but as they get older, they really prefer only to eat eelgrass in the bay. It is their very nutritious, like I mentioned, and their favorite food. So they're living in our bay eating the eelgrass. We think that there's around 100 of these green sea turtles in our bay, and they're quite large. They weigh about 300 to 350 pounds on average. And just think of them kind of like a cow moving across a field eating the grass, but they're under the water eating the eelgrass at the bottom of the bay. So these green sea turtles actually were not born or hatched here in our bay. They came from somewhere else. So they actually came from a fair distance away. And I'm going to show you a picture of their migration. All right. So in this picture, we see, a map of Mexico. And where we are in San Diego, we would be in the top left-hand corner of this map. And if you look down and you see on the bottom, there's a red circle. So that circle is around some islands we call Los Islas Revillagigedos. So these are the Revillagigedos Islands off of Mexico. So they're islands that are part of Mexico, and it is now a national park, and it is a protected area. So the turtles we have in the bay, you have to imagine that they hatched as little baby turtles on those islands, right? And then they crawled out into the water, and once they grew strong enough, they swam 1,000 miles to be up and live in our bay. So once these turtles reach a reproductive age and they want to have their own baby sea turtles between 20 and 50 years of age, they will then swim 1,000 miles back to these islands, crawl up on the island, and then lay the eggs that are their own baby sea turtles. So it's quite an amazing journey for our Eastern Pacific green sea turtles. Okay. So next, I'm going to show you another animal that I really love in the bay. This is a Brandt Geese. And you might notice in its mouth, what do we see growing? You can say it out loud. Excuse me, not growing, eating. Yes, it's eating the eelgrass. Okay, so it also comes to our bay to eat the eelgrass. That's how important it is. So these Brandt geese, in the winter they live here, really only in the winter. They're here between around November through the end of March, beginning of April. There's around, on average, 600 of them swimming in our bay. Right now, they're heading north, and they spend the summer in Alaska, or the far Alaskan area, the Arctic. And so that is around 3,000 miles or more. So they make an incredible migration. There's only a few left in the bay right now, but because they're all heading north about this time. So I'm going to show you an image of their migratory path. Okay, so we look at this map, and on the left, we see a long curved yellow line. So the bottom of that yellow line, right, is where the San Diego Bay is, where we're at right now. So like I mentioned, this is where they spend the winter in our bay where it's warm enough and they can eat the eelgrass. And in the winter, the far north, it's very cold, right? So they escape that cold and they come down to our bay to eat the eelgrass. But remember, in the summer, they fly all the way up, follow that yellow line up and around into Alaska, and that's where they fly and spend the summer. Because in the summer, it's warm and they can eat and get strong. So that is their migratory path, where they go back and forth between winter and summer. It's hard to even imagine, right? Flying over 3,000 miles each season. Very incredible. All right. So next, we're going to look at a different way that the eelgrass is being utilized in the bay. All right, so let's look at this picture. And again, I just want you to observe and ask the person next to you, what do we think is happening in this picture, right? Don't worry about right or wrong answer. Let's just take some time to notice what's happening in the picture and observe. So take a minute, talk to the person next to you about what might be happening in this picture. All right, so a little bit about what you might have observed. So what we're looking at here, right, is the eelgrass, and then the fish swimming in this image are juvenile fish. So imagine these fish being about as big as maybe half of your pinky. They're very small, right? And they're vulnerable, and they're just getting their start in life. So we call this an eelgrass nursery, right? So the fish, when they're very small, are growing and getting stronger, and they have some protection in this eelgrass nursery. Now, how they're protected is that larger fish might want to eat them, but they're able to swim in and out of the eelgrass and escape from their predator. So that gives them a chance to live and get larger and stronger, and eventually, right, go out into the ocean where they become much larger fish. So things like salmon or bass or different fish that you might like to eat really need the eelgrass to get strong and get their start in life. So it's very, very important for our young fish. And in 1996, the eelgrass was designated as essential fish habitat and became a protected species. So the eelgrass is a protected species because it's so important for our ecosystems in the bay. Okay, so next, we want to get a little movement. We're just going to do something for fun. All right, so follow me. I want you to stand up. Stand up. Give you a minute to get standing. Okay. I'll assume everybody out there standing. Okay, raise your hands in the air. All right, so I want you to sway like the eelgrass. Good job. Now I want you to take one hand and imagine that that is a juvenile fish moving in the eelgrass trying to escape a predator. Okay, so just moving around. Good job. Okay. All right, so it's just for fun to get some movement. Excellent. Okay, so next, just show you another image here. All right. So in this picture, right, we have a left-hand side and a right-hand side, and they're a little different. All right, so what I want you to do is just take a minute to write down what is different between the left and right-hand sides, and then think about why it might be different. Okay, so just take a couple minutes to write it, observe and write it down, and then share whatever you've observed with the person next to you. So I'll give you about 3 minutes to do this. Again, we're noticing what is different between the left and right-hand side and thinking about why that might be. Okay, go ahead. All right, so I'm guessing a lot of you noticed this difference between the left and right-hand side, were that on the left-hand side, we have the eelgrass, right? On the right-hand side, we don't. And on the left-hand side, right, we have a lot more fish than on the other side. So we talked about where there's eelgrass, it provides a better habitat or place for these different animals, such as these fish, to live, right? So we can actually have more fish when we have the eelgrass there. And we see more creatures in the mud, right? So everything is, we just have a richer life on the left-hand side. And one other important thing that you might have noticed is the water is cleaner on the left-hand side. And that's because the eelgrass actually helps filter the water and clean the water. All right, so I'm going to read this panel out loud for you. It says seagrass meadows. So we think of eelgrass as a kind of seagrass, right? Seagrass meadows are an important habitat. Small invertebrates and fishes are more abundant in seagrass meadows since the leaves provide a place to hide from their predators. Animals living in the sediments also prefer seagrass meadows on account of the stability the roots and the rhizomes provide. Even though seagrasses photosynthesize and act as a plant base of the food web, few animals actually eat seagrass directly. Instead, as seagrass dies and decomposes into detritus, it is consumed by microbes and fungi, which in turn are eaten by larger animals. Right. Okay. One more way that we're going to talk about eelgrass providing habitat in the bay. Oops, hold on. Do this again. All right. So take a minute again to draw and observe this picture. What do you notice? You can draw or talk to the person next to you. What do you notice in this picture? What do you think this might be? Okay, I'll give you a couple minutes to look at it, to talk to your partner. Okay, so what we have here, you might have made a guess that what we have here is a piece of eelgrass, right, that has eggs attached to the eelgrass. So these in particular are Pacific herring eggs. That's a kind of fish. And so what the eelgrass does in the bay is when the eggs are in the bay, the eelgrass gives them a place to attach to, so they can attach and grow and develop. So it's one more important way that the eelgrass is providing habitat in the bay. So I'm going to show you a picture of the actual Pacific herring, right? This is the egg on the eelgrass, but let's look at the Pacific herring once it grows into a fish, a full fish. So let's okay, so this is a picture of Pacific herring. They swim in schools of, right, looks like thousands. It's incredible. It's a very important fish. We consider it a keystone species. So many other animals are dependent on this fish. So as they grow larger and are swimming in schools of fish out in the ocean, we have different whales that depend on them as a food source, and different marine birds, and also humans eat the Pacific herring. So we want to think of all of these things as very important. For example, we need the eelgrass, right, for the egg, the Pacific herring egg to attach to, and then we then need the Pacific herring fish feeding the larger fish and birds. So each part of this puzzle, each part of this is connected, and we need all of the pieces together to have a healthy ecosystem and to have all of the animals that we love here in the bay and out in the ocean. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about, since we see how important this eelgrass is, right? We want to talk about how we can protect these areas. So each of us actually can play a part and help protect the eelgrass habitat and the animals in the bay that we talked about. You may not live near this bay, but you live likely near some source of water and can protect the lakes and bays and rivers in your area. So I'm going to explain a little bit about how that works and how you can do that. So let's take a look at this picture here. All right. So in this image, this is an image of a watershed, right? So you may live up towards the mountains. And so think of like your streets, right? And any garbage that is on your streets. Unfortunately, what can happen is when it rains, right, then that garbage can be washed into the storm drain. I'll show you what that is in a second. And so that water can wash into a river, and the river can eventually wash into a lake or into a bay. So we need to protect our watershed and protect our water, keep it clean, right? So I'm going to show you an image of storm drain. Okay, so you may have noticed on next to the sidewalk in the street, right, we have this hole in the storm drain here. So again, if there's any garbage on the street, what happens is the rain will wash it into this hole, right? And then it will wash into our rivers, lakes, or bays. But that garbage or that pollution, such as oil or chemicals, is very, very bad for any of the animals in the bay and bad for the eelgrass. So we want never to pour any chemical down these storm drains. And we always want to keep any of the garbage picked up around us off the street so that it doesn't wash into our lakes or bays and hurt the animals in those areas. So that's what you can do, right? If you're younger, you want to do that with your parents, and you can always have a community cleanup. So you get a bunch of the garbage off of the streets. So those are all things that you can do. So last, what I'd like you to do is take about 3 minutes and think about what you have learned today, right? And I want you to write it down on a piece of paper. Try to think of at least 3 things that you might have learned today. All right, I'm going to give you that time. Take about 3 minutes to write down different things that you have learned today. Go ahead. All right, 1 more minute to write down anything that you remember or found interesting today. Okay, good job. So what I'd like you to do next is turn to the person next to you and share, each of you share a little bit about what you wrote down and what you learned. Okay, so go ahead, take a couple minutes to do that. Share with the person next to you. All right. Good job. So I'm sure you learned a little bit about how the eelgrass feeds the green sea turtle and the Brandt Geese directly, right? Provides protection for juvenile fish, provides a place for the different eggs to attach to and develop, helps clean the bay, right? So it does so much. All right, well, that is about it for today. Again, thanks for joining us here at the Silver Strand State Beach Park. Hope you come down and visit us one day here at the park. And you all have a good day.